Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations, I'm Audley Stevenson, and this is the most audacious podcast on the web. That's right, this is the Audacious Living Podcast, and it's always a pleasure to be here as we continue that goal, and it's the ongoing goal of helping you live your best audacious life ever. Certainly, we love to connect and engage, and you can do so over at our social media channels. You can connect with us on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle is the Audacious Pod, and then on Facebook it's the entitled name, the Audacious Living Podcast, and of course on YouTube you can click that subscribe button and you're easily connected. I'd encourage you to like, follow, subscribe, share, tell a friend, comment, reach out by all means. We certainly do love to engage with our listeners in our community. Now, on this week's episode of the podcast, I'm really pleased to welcome Denise Cooper as today's guest. Now, Denise is an executive coach, a speaker, and an author. So she does a whole bunch of stuff, and she does it very, very well. She works with a cross-section of individuals and organizations where she provides leadership, coaching, training, and counsel for corporations as well as individuals. I mentioned that she's an author, and her latest book is Remarkable Leadership Lessons, Change Results, One Conversation at a Time. It's a profound title when you stop and think about it. One of the most important tools that leaders have in their arsenal is the ability to connect with the people that they're leading. And they can do this through conversations, hence one conversation at a time. And through these conversations, you can build connections. And these connections can be meaningful and not just any old connection. We're talking about meaningful and lasting ones that can lead to lasting relationships. And once those relationships are in place, anything is possible. Denise was a ton of fun to talk to, and I'm sure you will enjoy the conversation. You will enjoy the insights from her book. She tells a lot of real life stories, and the importance of leaders being comfortable telling that story is a very, very important skill. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Denise. Enjoy. Denise, how are you?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm fantastic. It's great to have you here on the podcast. It's a pleasure being here.
Oh, I'm so thrilled to talk to you today. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Man,
it's gonna be good.
You're making me blush. You're making me blush. But thank you. I'm glad you're here. The conversation today will be centered very much around leadership, and there's some and sort of here's an opportunity to plug your book, The Remarkable Leadership Lessons, which very enjoyable. I certainly love the way that sort of took you through your life, right, and all the lessons that learned, and what that says to me right off the bat is that they're all lessons exist in all of our world. Like there's always something to learn at some point in time, and it's a matter of sort of stopping and looking back and identifying those. I'm just curious for yourself, when did you sort of start to realize, oh, wait a second, there was actually a lesson in this incident from my childhood, for example?
When I wrote the book.
Yeah.
and so the book is really kind of, for those of you who get it, and I hope you'll get the book, it's called Remarkable Leadership Lessons, Change Results, One Conversation at a Time. But it's really small stories about things that happened in my life, people I met. Right. And so each one is one of those incidences where you stop, because the way we learn is we acquire some knowledge, but we have to reflect on it. That's kind of tease out, oh, this was important. Then we try it again. and we fall flat, and then we try it again, and we keep trying again and trying again and trying again. And so each one of the stories was really me learning over and over and over. And so some stories I knew immediately, some lessons I got like, bang, oh, wait a minute, I need to write that down. I need to do
Right.
this again. But others really did arise when I wrote the letter, and I got the feedback from other people
Mm.
that that's remarkable. That's what? How did you know that in the moment? I don't know. And a way I think I talk to people about is you can look back and see how your values show up in your life, what your beliefs
Absolutely.
are, what your character strengths are.
Mhm.
And these stories actually demonstrate character strengths that I was taught by Miss Louise, which is my mother,
Mm.
the teachers that I was around, the
Yep.
fact that I'm African American, grew up in Chicago, went to South Dakota,
Right.
one of like 15 Blacks in the whole state, probably. And then how that showed up and what it felt like to be in a place where I was the only, but
Right.
I was the only where they didn't understand what it was like to have Black people around.
Right. Yep.
We weren't the minority. The Indian Native Americans are the minority. And so to be able to stand on the balcony and kind of watch that,
Right.
that's a lesson in and of itself.
It absolutely is. It's for me, what I really appreciated is the whole realization piece,
Yeah.
because it's almost like that eureka moment, right? Where all of a sudden, oh my goodness, wow, I didn't know. And was there any particular lesson that really gave you that like eye opening, oh my goodness, kind of moment or feeling?
Um, Particularly in in the beginning of the book, the one where I was playing volleyball
Mm.
and fell, hit my knee. And, as all good coaches want to know, did you get hurt out of the process? And I was like, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. But she ran across Bonnie Almond. She ran across the court to make sure that I really hadn't hurt my knee. And she, being white from North Dakota, never seen anybody Black, looked, saw my skin, and it was, like it's white.
Right.
Pull the skin back, color skin deep, really. And she goes, it's white. You're white under there. And so here's like 26 players running over going, oh my God, you really are. What is that? And now we can kind of laugh at it and we think, oh, that really didn't happen. But it shows that my experiences are not your experiences.
Mm.
And that you see your life and you see and interpret the world through your life experience, through your lived experiences. And what we do is we just kind of minimize that, right?
Yep.
And we don't take like, well, what I did is nothing. And of course, everyone has seen it my way.
Right.
But I also remind people, if you want to know how lived experiences really shows up, go back and think about Thanksgiving dinner with your sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, the family, and talk about an experience where everybody was there.
Yeah.
And see how many perspectives show up.
That's exactly it. I mean, the minimization of lived experiences is huge, and we see that sort of over and over and time again. And not that it's always intentional. So I want to preface it by saying that, but it's just overlooked. Maybe that's where the ego kicks in, right, and says it's all about the way I see it and the way I do things, and that's what has got to be for everyone.
Yes.
But that's not the case. Lived experiences are huge because it frames so much of our decisions, how we view the world, how we make our choices, all of these things. So we have to pay attention to these experiences.
Yeah, yes. And for leaders, it really is about how you lead. So, all those studies that we hear about and are in the press about women lead different than men, yes, that's kind of the end result.
Yep.
But we rarely talk about how we got there. What is it that happens to women or men or people of color or people of any level of diversity, from ageism to neurodiversity, just a difference in the way our brain works, physical disabilities, all of those kinds of things. It's funny, I was reading a story, Adam Grant has a new book out called Think Again. And in it, he talks about people who are actually blind, but don't know they're blind.
Mm.
And how they move through the world not being blind,
where
everybody else is going, but you're blind.
Right. Right. Right.
So our world and the way we put it together is so unique. And until you kind of go back, reflect on it,
Right.
and then be open enough and curious enough to ask someone how they saw the same things,
Hmm.
we don't really learn,
Right.
because it's through this perspective. And now, oh, how can we find the shared and common things?
Right.
How do we center around our values, our beliefs, the way we think we want to treat people and be treated, right?
Hmm.
That's how we move to new decisions. That's how we
Right.
move to new levels of humanity and connectedness and ability to communicate without triggering people, right?
That's right. That's right. I was as you're talking, I was thinking about how important humility comes into play in this as
Oh yeah.
well, right? As
Yeah.
as a leader, sometimes they're oftentimes expected to have all the answers or to know which way to go, and that's not always the case. And the ability to demonstrate that humility, to say and make almost make yourself vulnerable in some instances, to turn to someone else, maybe it's a subordinate or someone who reports to, or whatever the nature of the relationship is, to be able to say, I don't know, what do you have, or what do you think, or what's your opinion, or what have you seen? That's a big thing.
Yes. And the word humility comes from or means to be grounded,
Yeah.
to understand what you know and what you don't know. And vulnerability is a fancy word, and we always think of it as weak, right?
That's
That
right.
if I'm vulnerable, somebody's going to take advantage of me. Well, that's actually more vulnerable, being more vulnerable than if you stop and you go, I don't necessarily know that.
Right.
I Somebody out here has a better answer. Let me figure out how to get to the goal or the end or the result I want by connecting and collaborating, because many eyes, many minds, many hands,
Yes.
right? Make
Burden.
work
Yep.
easy.
Make the burden light, right? That's what it is.
Right.
Good light. We spend a lot of time on this podcast talking about audaciousness. I mean, this is the Audacious Living Podcast, and we talk all about that. But the underlying core is really about being bold. And and it's so important that we demonstrate the boldness in our actions. And it's not just for leaders; it's for any of us can
Right.
demonstrate this. But what if you sort of talk about the significance of leaders demonstrating boldness in their actions?
Well, and boldness for leaders in particular, but especially as the higher you ascend in in the corporate ladder, or the owners of businesses, the people who are kind of at the top, deciding what the strategy is, and have access to all the resources, and the boldest move they can make is what we've been talking about: to be vulnerable, to
Mm,
admit that they don't know, but then be open and curious enough to allow people to help them learn, to bring new ideas, and to suspend judgment
right.
so that they can evaluate and the group can evaluate, because those folks see things differently. And unfortunately, oftentimes, when you're sitting in that kind of C-suite seat, you're the CEO, CFO, whatever. One of the problems is that you think everybody's telling you the truth.
Right.
And what they're telling you is a version of truth that won't piss
Right.
you off. Right? Based on how they've seen you react when you get bad news.
Right. Right. That's funny. I like that.
And we all suffer expectation hangovers, right?
This is it. We absolutely do. No, we
And
absolutely
so
do.
being conscious of, our impact, the impact of our behavior,
Hmm.
is that is truly living an audacious life. That's just my perspective of it,
Yep.
because what it means is that I'm aware of I'm aware of what I know, and I'm aware that I don't know everything.
That's right.
I'm curious enough to allow someone else to have an opinion that's different than mine, and to explore and to understand. But I also have behaviors that allow me to say, that's an interesting opinion. That thought, that way I can accept. These over here, I don't think they fit, or I don't
Right.
think they're the right process for us to go forward. And then it's about, how do you create sustainable and reputable behaviors in the organization? And so being really clear about how your organization runs,
Nice.
what behaviors, what are the agreements, both open and silent, we have between us,
Right.
and to be able to keep motivating and nurturing the right ones.
Right. Right. And that's why we talked about sort of expectations earlier. That's why it's so important that these things are laid out clearly, so the expectations are clear for everyone.
Yeah. And that's the hardest thing, because we live in a culture, we grow up, our school system, everything teaches us that feedback is always negative. And so our defense mechanism and our defense hearing, which is less than our open hearing. So when you're in defensive mode, you can't hear, you can't think as well as when you're open-hearted. We know we can track it on fMRIs,
Yeah.
brain scans. We know exactly when fear hits, when that, oh my God, I don't want to.
It's one of the hardest things, Denise. It really is. It's something we all struggle with, and even myself, I have to consciously kind of, okay, just breathe, take your time, listen with your heart, right?
That is the number one skill. That is the skill, is breathing, because it opens up and disconnects that system, that autonomic system that says, "Ooh, shut down."
That's right. That's right. No, it's hard.
It's beautiful, but it's beautiful when other people are around.
Yes.
So if I see you doing it, I can say, you know what, I need you to breathe. And because we have a relationship,
yes,
you can accept me giving you that feedback without feeling like I'm criticizing you, right?
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah. If I feel like I'm being attacked, or I feel that you're coming for me, or that criticism, yes, absolutely. But and you said a very important word, the relationship. If there's a relationship there, with relationship naturally comes a form of trust. And that's what, when we sort of look at the leadership dynamic, it's a matter of trusting one another, right? It's a matter that I trust the people who I'm leading, or that I'm trust the person that's leading me, right? And once that's there, that can sort of frame the sort of foundation for everything else that follows.
Yeah. People are always asking me for tips and techniques. What are a couple of things that I can think about, I can do, make me better. That's kind of the job of an executive trainer and coach. And I try to remind people that it's really a few things. The first one is that you have to connect. You have to connect to self. You have to connect to the fact that other people are different, but you also have to regulate that behavior between who you are and how you show up and how others might show up. And then you've got to be able to communicate. Leaders in particular have to get comfortable telling their story a lot. And I tell the story all the time. So, one of my favorite singers is Tina Turner.
Okay.
So imagine how many times Tina Turner has sang Proud Mary. But every time she sings it, sounds like it's the first time. When you're a leader, you have to tell that story the same number of times, year after year, day after day, because every time you get new people in, it changes the dynamics of the group.
Right.
When you show up consistently, trust goes up. So it's communicate to connect, communicate to direct, and communicate to support. And then the last piece is always about measuring and engaging. And it's this idea of how can we collaborate and co-create something. Collaboration originally meant, being with the enemy or working with the enemy.
Right.
Well,
no, not everyone's your enemy.
Well, but it's not the enemy that got turned because it was someone who had a different opinion. So if we change it from the enemy to someone who has a different opinion, it opens the door for us to co-create something better than if you did it by yourself or I did it by myself.
That's right.
So those are the values that leaders in companies that are not only high performers, but sustainably high performers.
Right.
Year after year, end over end, they manage the expectations of Wall Street or their constituents or their customers or their employees, but they consistently show up as powerful, authentic, trustworthy, open people who want to be followed, which is the definition of a leader, right?
Differing opinions. I like that one because there's an assumption that's a bad thing, and it's actually not. The differing of opinions opens up the way for something new that I never thought of. and actually I think it does that for both sides. So very much of our viewpoint on how we perceive it. I think once you can make that adjustment and understand that the varying opinions, which oftentimes will go back to what we talked about earlier, are based on our life lived experiences, right? So we're acknowledging the lived experiences, acknowledging the opinions, but then creating something beautiful together.
That's exactly right. And it's those, we can say differing opinions, bring different options. Anything that neutralizes the charge of fear and judgment.
Right.
Whatever that language is, embrace that language, because that's how you connect through the words. Is that I can listen to the words and you don't charge me. You don't trigger me to go into a state of fear and defensiveness.
Yeah. Yeah. When you talked earlier about singing the same song, if you gave the example of Tina Turner, another very important piece in that, and you mentioned consistency, and it's not only consistent in our words, but in our actions, in our energy, in the manner in which we display love, and all of those things. There needs to be consistency, because if it doesn't exist, or it doesn't happen, or you have a bad day or whatever, it can create some confusion in terms of what your real message is.
Yeah, and the confusion comes from, I don't understand why you had a bad day. It's not that you can't have a bad day. It's that I don't understand why you have a bad day. And if I don't have enough of a relationship that I trust you, then what I do is I start filling in that story with the worst case scenario, right?
Yes.
It must be about me.
I messed it up. You're angry at me. You don't like me.
You don't like. There you go.
That's self-talk we do, right? We get there. That's actually quite funny, because I can hear some of those thoughts in my head that I've thought too, right? So I get it.
Oh yeah,
we've all been there.
She didn't look at me. Oh my God, there's something wrong. Like that email. They didn't like that email. Oh.
Right. But that's the ego thing, right? Because we're so caught up in our own world that we think it's about us, right? That so something small that happens, it must be us, and there's no possible way that this person could have a life or a world beyond me or outside of me that would influence their behavior. It's not possible, right?
Of course not. Of course not. What are you talking about? It's about me.
It's gotta be.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm addicted to write.
Yeah. Oh, that's another one too. No, it happens. It so happens, and throughout the years, the conversations of leadership, they've changed so much because we're learning so much more about leadership. But in the heart of it, at the end of the day, it is truly, and you said, how we connect to people.
Yeah.
Because if you make that connection to people, and it's done the right way, then that just, again, it opens the way for a lot of great things to happen.
Yeah. Some of my clients have been tech companies, and I have to remind them that no matter how much you trust this technology, a person had to do it. You need people to interface with the technology for the technology to work.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing thing. Everything revolves around humanity, our humanity.
Right. And that's why it's so important that we don't lose sight of that, or don't forget that, if you will, because at the end of the day, that's we talk about connectedness. That's kind of what that connection piece is. So no, that's a great point. Thank you for raising that. I want to sort of talk about the work that you do, your coaching with the executive work that you do, because I would imagine you're sort of seeing a different cross section of leaders and a cross section of different sort of genres, if you will. Are there any sort of common themes that you're seeing amongst them when you get into these coaching situations?
Yes. One of the things that we don't do well, period, is we spend a lot of time in school as executives in school learning all kinds of things about products and numbers and statistics, etc. And yet we don't spend any time talking about people and how to manage people and how to be better leaders in general. We expect the corporation to teach us how to be better leaders. We're going to learn by trial and error. And yet we don't, if somebody wants to learn how to play golf, you don't assume that you're just going to get out there, grab a club, and suddenly be good.
Right.
But yet we treat leadership just like that.
That's right.
The other thing that is a theme is that no one has really taught us that the acquisition of knowledge does not deal with your performance. The only way performance is judged is you have to have some knowledge, you apply that knowledge, and then we judge performance.
Right.
And so when we think we know, or we've got really bad theories, and much of the theories and high level stuff, the sayings, the marketing pieces that are out there are absolutely wrong. We know so much about how the human brain works, how there's connectivity between people, the need to be in groups. We just don't bring them into leadership. We think that if you communicate well, then it's fine. But this thing about connection is important. And it's not necessarily about your style, but it is about, are you human? Do you show your humanity?
Right.
Can you help? Are you about helping other individuals? Are you shepherding and is seeing the good and the value and how people can be used? Because all of us want to be seen, heard, and feel relevant.
Absolutely.
And the best leaders do just those three things.
Yeah.
Then the results show up.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. People do want to be validated, right? And so if they're getting that, then I think you're tapping into something really, really important. You sort of talked about some wrong messaging that's out there. What if you can sort of give an example or two of what we're seeing that maybe isn't completely accurate?
Well, one of the things that we hear a lot about is personality matters.
Okay.
You have to have this strong personality, or women lead because they're the soft skills are not good skills. Well, it turns out that those soft skills enable results. So soft skill, communication, soft skill, the ability to give feedback, soft skill, the ability to talk about an idea and to debate, soft skill, judgment, decision. Tell me a leader that doesn't have to deal with those skills, and yet we don't teach them how to think about culture, the agreements that we have between each other. And now it's, culture matters, culture matters, culture matters.
Right.
But behavior is this. So one of the things I tell leaders all the time is, for well over 60 years, we've been talking about diversity and inclusion. We've been talking about culture, et cetera.
Yep.
And yet we all wring our hands, and silently what we say is we just can't handle this. We just can't. But let me switch that. You, Mr. Leader, Miss Leader, you have a product that for 50 years hasn't been working.
Right.
And your head of marketing, your head of operations say, well, it just doesn't work. And you've got some customers who are continually buying it, but it just doesn't work. What would you do? And to a fault, to every one of them, they'd say, well, I'd get rid of that. I'd either make a decision to get rid of it, or I'd say we're going to fix it. And we're going to make sure that our customers get what we say we're going to get. Isn't that interesting that you don't demand that of your HR department? We can measure what matters. We can measure performance. We have data points that tell us whether we have an engaged workforce or don't.
Absolutely.
We have data points that tell us that can be codified, measured, statistically. There was a time I was in a company and I was the chief HR person for the world, for 2,300 scientists, right?
Yep.
And we told them about this grand compensation program. It's equitable. If you perform, you will be at the top of the range, etc. Well, guess what? As scientists do, prove it.
Yeah, proof. They want the proof.
Prove it.
That's right.
Trust me, I was sweating blood because that was one of those lessons. I'm just regurgitating what everybody else said.
Yes.
And I don't even know how to do this.
Yeah.
I gathered the team together. I said, look, we're going to work on this together because I don't know how to do statistical models, but you do. And lo and behold, we blinded the data. We let the data in, years in job, performance reviews, who you work for, the whole thing. And the model worked.
Yes.
Thank God.
Yeah.
However, what it taught me is that if you have the right people who are
Yes.
not like you at the table, you can always find a solution.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because they're not thinking like you, and therefore they're not seeing the problem or the challenge the same way you do, right?
Exactly.
And therefore they're changing the approach is going to be different. Like, you want to have a diverse group of people around the table because they bring again, we go back to the perspectives and the lived experiences. All of these things help to find solutions quicker, and that's just factual.
And so when you ask about what are some of the myths out there that we keep doing is, well, if we get the right technical skill person, so a marketing person who's got 50 years of marketing,
Right.
then we're going to come up with the best solutions.
Yeah.
Well, no, because you really need somebody who has, now it's about data analytics.
Yes.
Very different skill set.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
wait a minute. Now it's about having artists and people who understand social psychology on your team.
Right.
The same is true of HR. How many HR departments model diversity? And I'm not just talking about diversity of, black or white or
Right.
or whatever, skin color, that kind of thing, but truly neurodiversity, diversity of thought, diversity of skills. How do you role model what you say the business leaders ought to be able to do?
Right.
And if you're not role modeling, we live in a very polite country. I don't know about you. I live in the South. We are very, very polite. We will say,
up here in Canada, we're not too bad ourselves. We're polite people. We apologize for everything. We say we're sorry for everything.
We will bless your heart. And what that is code for you idiot. You're lying to me and I'm not going to believe you.
That's hilarious. I love it.
What we do is we just don't call you a liar to your face.
That's right. Yeah.
But we talk about you a lot behind your back.
That's it. But that's a polite thing to do, right?
I'm just saying, okay?
Oh my goodness. One of the things that you touched on, came to mind is about roles and having people in the right roles, right? So oftentimes, it happens in many organizations where an individual will perform in a certain job, and the belief is then that they now can, because they perform well in this one job, that they can step in and perform in a leadership capacity, and they've never done it before.
Right.
But the thing that oftentimes forgotten is a lot of times, leadership is on the job training. Like you're learning as you go, and to think that because you did job A immediately equips you for job B isn't always the right approach, and it happens all the time in companies.
Yes, and I will the whole premise that if you did job A and if I toss you into job B, if you're really good, you'll figure it out. Smart people figure it out.
Yeah, and some do, right? Like there's some that do. However, not with a few bumps along the way.
Pressure test that. Let's pressure test that.
Yeah.
So there are a couple studies, out there that say, we have this bell curve, right?
Yes.
Well, if you think of a bell curve, cut it in half, 50% of the folks are actually failing. Only, 10% are actually exceeding and making it. Everybody else is peddling water. So imagine your management team that really sits as a bell curve. 50% of your management team is failing at the job, underperforming. That's failure to me. Not reaching their potential. And why? It's because of what you just said. You're smart enough, Audrey. I'm just going to put you in the job.
Right.
And we don't understand the impact that has on the business. And what I tell leaders all the time, it takes 3 business cycles, however fast they are, slow they are. But it takes 3 business cycles. The first one, you're just pedaling as fast as you can, figuring it out, because we don't have structures in place to teach you how to do nothing, right? The second one, you go, oh, that's what that meant last year. Let me try. And you've put in some things. Now you got to figure it out. The second year, you're actually living with the things you did the first year. And it isn't until the third year or the third business cycle that you finally go, oh, wait a minute, it's coming together. Let me try and figure it out. But what most companies do is after about 1.5 to 2 years, what do? Promote you.
Right.
Move the needle, move you around so that you never get grounded. You can't be humble. You can't be grounded.
Mm, mm. I think of my own leadership journey. I mean, outside of podcasting, I also a deputy commissioner of the National Basketball League of Canada. So it's a pro league here in Canada, one of the longest. We're heading into our 10th season prior to COVID. We've had lots of success, and we're trending upwards in the right direction. COVID kind of came along and paused that. But I think about my role as the deputy commissioner. I manage league operations. I manage how we function.
Yeah.
And it probably took me to the third year that I'm like, okay, right? This is the first year, very much so. I was pedaling and treading water and doing all sorts of things to sort of figure things out because the business doesn't stop so I can learn. It doesn't slow down so we can figure things out. It doesn't come back and check with us. Hey, Audley, are you okay now? Can we proceed? That doesn't happen. It's learn as you go. And you go through that first cycle and you, okay, that was okay. You come the second way around and you correct what you did before, but then you learn something new. And by the time you get to the third, you sort of bring that all together. So, I mean, me going in my fifth, I'm feeling really good right now.
Now you've got the traction. You figured
That's
it out.
right.
Now you're ready to go into a role that's similar, maybe slightly larger. But you're now getting to the point where okay, I know. You understand the cycles. You understand
That's
what
right.
talent needs are for that particular role. You can put all those pieces together.
Yes.
And every business is different. I mean, I was in one business, their business cycle was 7 weeks. I was in another business that it was 6 months. And I was in another business, it was 8 years.
Wow.
So,
Wow. So the first step is understanding when the cycle starts and stops, because that's important.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is.
It is.
And what's important to the business?
That's right.
One of those aha moments that you were talking about at the beginning was, for a long time, or a couple of years, I was in a chemical factory.
Yep.
So all chemical factories sit on little islands away from human beings for a good reason. So if it happens, you eliminate species, right?
Right.
And so for me, if somebody ran in my office and went, "Oh my God, there's been a problem," I'm grabbing my gas mask. We're sounding an alarm.
Evacuate. Let's go.
And then I went to the Gap. And so I remember the first time they ran in my office, "Oh my God, we got a problem." And I was over the designers. The seam in the shirt of the men's shirt is off. And I'm like, what?
I'll take that problem any day of the week.
You don't understand. You're telling me that the biggest problem we got is the seams don't line up?
I'll take that one. But I get it.
Perspective.
That's right. Well, Denise, I've so appreciate this conversation, and we kind of look back at, we started talking about humility and connectedness and communication and trust, and we obviously touch on boldness because the Audacious Living podcast has to touch on boldness. We got there, and we've gone through all the cycles. It kind of, to me, it sort of feels like we've gone through your entire book.
And thank you for that perspective, because I don't think anybody's ever given me that one yet.
but certainly, I the point in my joke is very much the themes have resonated, right? They come out strongly, and again, the manner in which you presented them through just everyday stories that people can relate to was so important. I'm glad that you took that approach with it, because it made it that more digestible and understandable, but it resonates too, right? So it's one thing to take on a story and go, "Oh, that's a cute story, that's a nice story, that's a great story," but when you think about the practical applications, right? And that's what's so important. So I commend you for doing that. Thank you. And maybe just before we sign off here, I wonder if is there any sort of particular lesson that maybe stands out for you? I realize these are probably all like your little babies, and they're all had certain values, certain points in your life, but I'm wondering if there's one that has a greater significance to you.
I think it's Aiden and Susan, because I do so much leadership stuff, right? And so as an HR person, we always get, somebody who's a new leader. We talked a little bit about new leaders. It come in and they got an opening on their team, and we try to create this culture where everybody can live. And Aiden came to me because he had this opening on the team. He was going to hire some people outside who were much more talented, but the organization said, hey, we need you to hire Susan. And he went, I'm a good soldier. He hadn't been there that long. I'm a good soldier, I'll hire him. And then he finds out that Susan has a bad reputation, not able to make all of the goals. People didn't want to work with her. They weren't turning in projects. It was a project management group.
Yep.
A lot of stuff that's going on. And he came to me and he says, what am I supposed to do? Because now I talked to our old boss and they said, well, they really should have fired her, but they didn't. Well, and did they tell her? No, of course they didn't tell her that her performance was that way. And so Aiden was torn because he had learned that all boats rise, and generally it's the leader's problem when someone is failing. You have to figure this out. And he didn't want to get rid of Susan. And so what we did was we structured, you can read more in the story, but we structured a plan in which we could get Susan to the point that, first of all, one thing I tell everybody, we all know when we're failing.
Yeah.
We don't want you to know we're failing, but we know when we are not connecting, when we're not connecting, communicating, and collaborating with other individuals. We know when that's not happening. And we know when we are struggling in the role. But what we do is we put up our defenses and we become, and we don't want to admit it because we don't like the consequences. We don't like that feeling of being judged as less than. And so what we did was we put together a nice plan in which what he did was he had a conversation with her to lower those defenses and to get her to connect to him. And then what he had to do was help her with some skills, because her skills were not developed because nobody wanted to teach her. They just dumped her in a role, above her skill level. And then the last thing that we talked about was how do you talk to everyone else around them to lessen the judgment and to give her a chance to be refreshed and anew. Forgiveness. So that she could rise to the occasion. I'm happy to say, and you can read all the rest of the details, after a year, she became a solid performer, never a high performer, but she became a solid performer. She moved on to another job and she was much more successful. And the two of them have become good friends. And he's now a coach for her, a mentor, I would say, for her out of it. So a win, win, and win for the whole organization. He got to live his values, that people really are the most important. He learned how to navigate a poor performance, which was due to a bad relationship, lack of feedback, all the things that contribute, and poor skill set. But then he also learned how to create a culture where people could make mistakes and still rise from the ashes of doom. Because, once you get dubbed, you're a jerk. Yeah. But allow them to rise from the ashes. That person can, again, be a good performer. And it doesn't take long because her performance started turning around in about 3.5, 4 months. Right. The problem is nobody believed it. They all went through the doubt of, well, she'll turn around, she'll snap your head off. She'll blah, 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 blah. She ain't changed. But over time, they began to see her real heart because of the relationship that the two of them and the fact that they were able to successfully complete the project.
That's a heartwarming story, and that's a good one.
That's being audacious.
Yeah, well, it is, right, and the act of forgiveness is being audacious, right? And without that, there clearly in this story, it wouldn't have ended the way it did. So, forgiving others, and it's funny. Whenever I get into conversations about audacious, I always have to remind people that it's not. It might feel like jumping off or jumping out of a plane or skydiving or surfing or something reckless or wild, but it's not necessarily that. And it doesn't have to be those things to be considered audacious. And it's really a function of us stepping out and being our true selves. And when we can do that and be our true selves and forgive and help create the culture and impact people around us positively, that's when we're being the most effective leader that we possibly can be.
And that is audacious because it's too many of us, too many leaders. It's easy. It would have been easy for him to do what HR said, which was pick her up and get rid of her.
Right.
That's the easy route.
Yeah.
But he chose a different route. He saw different options. He chose to be humble, to be a person of his word, that he's not going to let somebody sink because the system failed them.
Right.
And in the end, she won, he won, and the organization won.
Amazing. I love it. Denise, where can we send our listeners to check out, pick up their very own copy of Remarkable Leadership Lessons?
Absolutely easy. Go to Denise Cooper on Amazon.com. Takes you right there. And if they want to connect with me, I tell everyone, go to LinkedIn. I'm Denise Cooper, Charlotte, North Carolina. So when you click in, I'm happy to link to connect with anybody. And then my website is remarkableleadershiplessons.com.
Awesome. Denise, again, I really appreciate this today. It's been a lot of fun, great insights. Congratulations on a great book, and all the best.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank your listeners for hanging in there and listen to me go, whoop, 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 whoop.
They're used to it with me, so it's okay. Take care, Denise. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Back we are here on the podcast, and thank you goes out first to Denise for hanging out here with me on the podcast and enlightening us and sharing. I think your leadership experiences and hearing some of those experiences was really much appreciated and really helped with understanding a little bit more of this concept. Now, the journey that leaders take on their own path to growth and development isn't an easy one. However, it's not one that they have to take alone. As my mom oftentimes told me on many occasions, is many hands make the burden light. It's the job of the leader to invite others along with them on that path of discovery that they go on. And it's through that togetherness that great things can occur. Hey, listen, if you haven't registered for email notifications of the podcast, you certainly can do so by heading over to bestaudaciouslife.com. All you've got to do is enter your email address and you'll be immediately alerted every time new content comes out. We've reached the end of the episode, and I really want to take this opportunity to thank our listeners. The support is fantastic. I want to thank you. It's tremendous and really what keeps us going, and really appreciate it. So certainly keep the good stuff coming, and we will do our part. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.